So what is fake news? If you're the 45th president of the United States, fake news media, or the failing New York Times, NBC News, ABC News, CNN, the enemy of the American people. That's what fake news is if you're the president of the United States. But we're trying now, I think, in the journalism community to move away from the term because it's become a catch-all term, a term used to attack journalists, and a term now, I think, that we hear amongst ourselves to express disagreement with another person's point of view, really. That's it. We've seen this or heard this a million times at different press conferences. So instead of fake news, because words matter, we're trying to move away or move towards using words like false news or misleading news. And for fact-checking purposes, or today's purpose anyway, words like disinformation and misinformation. And we're going to talk a little bit about that and give you some examples. So disinformation is the deliberate creation and or sharing of false information in order to mislead. And that's very different from misinformation, which is the act of sharing information without realizing it's wrong. And probably if you look at your own circle of family or friends, and you're on WhatsApp, you're on Instagram, on Facebook, we've all been caught at some point or another sharing something we thought was real but wasn't. And so that would be an example of misinformation. And so I'll start with there and just give you one example. CBC filed the story. It was just a local story out of PEI. Drivers will now lose their license if they legally pass a school bus. They have a team now that they've assembled that are fact checkers. Most of them, some of them are bilingual, some of them work at Radio-Canada, CBC, some are in Montreal. So Jeff Yates is one of these reporters that are part of this fact-checking unit now. And he's sitting there one day, as we all do. So if you work for the public broadcaster, you have access to tools that let you see how your story is doing in any given hour or day. I worked there for 6 years, and we would get like hourly updates if we wanted them, if not every 6 hours. However often you wanted to know how a story was doing, you could go and just find out. So he goes and looks and notices that this little local story from PEI has like 5.8 million interactions on Facebook. So just to give you some context, I went and I did a search for the most interactions on Facebook for the last couple of years in the US for American stories. And the most were like 2-point-something million. This little story gets 5.8 million interactions on Facebook, and Jeff goes, what is happening? Because, obviously there's just not that many people in PI. So he looks into it, and next thing he realizes is that the story is being shared in the US, but it's being shared because people think the story is about their county or where they live. So I'm going to try this. Yeah. Okay. So there's one example. Monroe Township Fire Rescue Department. So Monroe Township, I had to look it up, is in New Jersey. People, it's about time. Good. Losing your license should be only the beginning of it. And just this one post, and you can see it there. I think he has it in French, but like 33,000 views just for this one. So Jeff starts to poke around, and you know what? I didn't bring it up there, but it's just like multiple little cities, and that's what's happened. So I just want you to know that had you read the story, you would have known that it was from PEI. So obviously people are not reading stories, right? And I think we're all guilty of that. We're seeing headlines and we're sharing, oh my God, did you hear about this, right? Or we see something on Twitter, right? You see the headline. I look at some Twitter accounts and people are tweeting so fast. I'm saying to myself, there is no way you have read an 800-word story every 30 seconds for the last 5 minutes. There's just no way, right? So that's what's happening. I think we all have a little bit of attention deficit disorder. Our attention spans are just not what they used to be. We see headlines, and that's where we get our news, right, from social media. So we see headlines, we pass them along. So just keep in mind, the next time you're tempted to do that, you could be passing along, disinformation or contributing to that anyway. So one of the most popular formats that we're familiar with are memes. And for fact-checking purposes, a meme refers to an image or a video or a text that's been copied from another source, like changed, altered in some way, doctored, sometimes potentially humorous, satirical, and then, yeah, again, just, it just makes the rounds on the internet. So here's one example, just this past week. The Burnaby North Seymour Conservative Constituency Association, their Facebook page, puts this up, words of wisdom. And then a quote that says is attributed to Rick Mercer. So what does it say? If you're between the age of 18 and 25 and you want to scare the hell out of people that run this country, this time around, do the unexpected. Take 20 minutes out of your day and do what young people all around the world are dying to do. Vote conservative. So Rick Mercer gets tagged on this, and the thing just blows up. It blows up on Facebook, it blows up on Twitter. So this is Rick Mercer, and I know it's Rick Mercer because there's that little blue check mark, right, that tells me it's a verified account. He writes, "Dear Andrew Scheer, and good folks at the CPC, the Conservative Party of Canada headquarters. Your candidate in Burnaby North Seymour is distributing a meme on social media with my face and the words, 'Vote Conservative,' indicating it's a quote from me. Not true, all fake, please stop. Hashtag, who are these people? Hashtag Canadian politics, hashtag yuck." I guess it doesn't stop, so he's trying to respond now to people who are tagging him. So again, nope, not real, just a straight up fake by the candidate, I guess. And again, right, it's Rick Mercer, so he's getting thousands of likes on these posts. So if you're a journalist now at CBC, there's probably a little bit of pressure on you to fact check this right away. Somebody's gonna say, did Rick really say this? So if you watch the show, if you know Rick, the first thing you do is he probably had a rant about this at some point. So sure enough, his fans, people who watch him, who love him, that's what they're doing. So it's not even the journalists. I think the fans are beating the journalists at this. They go, they find a clip on YouTube, they listen to it, and now everybody starts transcribing to make sure, is it what he said? So towards the end of that clip, we do hear him saying that, except he doesn't say vote conservative, he just says vote, right?
So here we have it. We are heading into an election, or as Stephen Harper calls it, a dangerous and unnecessary exercise. Because as we all know, Canada is one of the world's greatest democracies, and the greatest threat to that democracy is that we get to vote. But vote we will. So that means if you live in a retirement home, prepare to be targeted, because these days it's all about targeting the vote. All the major parties have well-publicized plans to target the ethnic vote, the women's vote, the blue-collar vote, the corporate vote. If there were more than 5 paraplegic lesbian Inuit women in Labrador, they would be a target. Everyone is targeted except for one group, the youth vote. There are more than 3 million young eligible voters in this country, and as far as any of the political parties are concerned, you might as well all be dead. In fact, in some elections, in Quebec, for example, the dead have a higher voter turnout. It is the conventional wisdom of all political parties that young people will not vote, and the parties, they like it that way. It's why your tuition keeps going up. So please, if you are between the age of 18 and 25 and you want to scare the hell out of the people that run this country, this time around, do the unexpected. Take 20 minutes out of your day and do what young people all over the world are dying to do. Vote.
But there's a couple of things here that are interesting, because Rick obviously is no longer doing this show. Our memories are not always what they used to be. His first instance was like, it's all fake, like none of it is true. Well, Rick, you actually did say that, just obviously you didn't say vote conservative. And so that's just one example of disinformation this past week. That's okay. I'm gonna show you just like a few things, a few examples of disinformation, and just as we go along, just point out little things that you should be looking for, right? So again, you're looking for original or primary sources always, always, always. Like that's the first thing. Anytime you see something, you want to go straight to the source. So if somebody is quoting somebody, like that quote is still not good enough. You really want to go back and and find the source, the original source. Is the source reliable? What's a reliable source? Well, usually sources that are nonpartisan, that have a strong history of citation from experts, that provide clear and complete details about their work. Another example this week. So again, when we're talking about memes, I know the students will know what memes is. I don't want to assume that everybody knows them, but you've probably seen them in your social media feeds, and now you can put the two together. We see this one this week. Meet RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki. Brenda is married to Bill Morneau's cousin and was directly appointed to her position by Justin Trudeau. And then at the bottom it says the SNC Lavalin obstruction of justice file just happens to be in her sandbox. Got any questions? I'm sure we have questions. So, talking about going straight to the source again, the original source. So your first thing you should do really as a journalist is go to Bill Morneau, go to the RCMP. So those are the first phone calls you're making in a newsroom. And of course you're calling their media line. You're saying there's this thing circulating. We don't know yet who's put it out there, but we want to know if it's true. And so, of course, they're, in this day and age, they're like, what? What are you talking about? Show us show us an example. You send it to them. Now, it's a bureaucracy. Like the RCMP is, just like every federal agency, like it's going to take some time. They're not going to get back to you right away. So now they're going up the chain. They've got to find Brenda Lucki, ask her, is she related to Bill Morneau? Bill Morneau, by the way, is the finance minister. So now we also have to go to Bill Morneau's team and ask, is there a family relationship? Anyways, this can take minutes, it can take hours, it can take like a whole day. In the meantime, that meme is just being distributed. So the disinformation just continues on social media. So you can't just sit there though and wait and hope that they get back to you in a timely fashion. So you do have to be proactive too. So CBC, for instance, reviewed publicly available family trees. So they started to look for websites about genealogy to see if they could find correlations. Obituaries too, which honestly, like I wouldn't have thought of that, right? See if there's a correlation, did somebody pass? When you write an obit, you have all the family members listed, right? As we all do, there's a tradition, of what an obituary looks like. So they're doing that while, they're waiting to hear back. And I saw Brent had his hand up for half a second. Question? Okay. If I want to go back on the slide, do I just like the back arrow? Yes, there you go. Okay, so there's a lot of things here, and so I'm just trying to break them down, right? So yes, she is in fact the commissioner. Like that's a very easy fact checking, right? RCMP, who's the commissioner. Is she married to Bill Morneau's cousin? We don't know yet. Was she directly appointed by Justin Trudeau? So you go and you look for appointments. So the Prime Minister of Canada always has a page, and all the appointments are there. So, I did this before today. So I went and I looked it up. Is the appointment there? Was she in fact appointed by him? And I see that she was. Now, the Prime Minister of Canada doesn't just say, oh, you've been, baking some really great pies for me lately. I'm going to appoint you to this position. There's a committee that gives recommendations to the public safety minister. And so directly, yes, it is appointed by the Prime Minister, but there's a process in place, right? Because the assumption here too is that there's some sort of a conflict of interest, right? But anyways, so appointed by Trudeau, yes. The SNC-Lavalin obstruction file, so another claim, like several claims in this one meme, right? Just happens to be in her sandbox. Got any questions? So the SNC-Lavalin scandal has taken up a lot of oxygen in Ottawa. I don't know that it is resonating with your average person. You know, I always, like, when I'm covering politics, I say to myself, like, is this something that my family is talking about, you know, back in Montreal? Like, is this something that my friends in Toronto are discussing? I'm not sure, but it has taken up a lot of oxygen. And, you know, we're in an election campaign, right? And so, of course, it's going to come up. The RCMP, however, have not launched an official investigation, which the meme sort of indicates that there's an investigation going. This file is on her desk, you know? She's just sitting on it. But the truth is they haven't, and we know this, and that's also very easily fact-checkable. They say they're just reviewing the case carefully, and they've promised to take action as required. So, you know, if you're a journalist in a newsroom, a mainstream newsroom, like, this would have taken you probably several hours, or like this would have been like the bulk of your day. And, you know, if you're a digital reporter like I was, you know, so you spend a few hours on this, then the radio reporter is doing hits on this, the TV reporter is doing hits on this. In the meantime, that meme, that disinformation keeps being circulated. So the other thing that's important too is for journalists not to keep distributing that disinformation. So what a lot of journalists are doing now is that, and I don't know if yes, so that's what a lot of journalists are doing now, a lot of media organizations are doing. They're putting a stamp on it saying false, because you don't want to be part of the problem. You don't want to be part of that disinformation circulating in social media circles, even once you've shown that it was false, that you debunked it. Brent, is now a good time for your question?
Well, I thought it was interesting too on the Rick Mercer point. Something else that kind of stood out to me as a journalist looking through it, trying to figure out, you know, is this accurate or not? Is the date when that video was?
Yes.
It showed up as 2011, if I'm not mistaken.
Is there a date there? You guys, you see the date?
No, when you opened it up, the link into the...
Oh, when I played it,
yeah.
Yes. That's an excellent point, actually. I'm so glad you brought that up. So one of the thing about, and something else to keep an eye out on, and I think we've all seen this on Facebook, because I know I see it all the time. Something pops up in your feed, and it's made to look like it's new. Like whoever is bringing it back is like wants to spark like a new wave of outrage, right? And again, we don't click through the stories, we don't read them, we just read the headlines. So suddenly you're like, oh my God, Rick wants us to vote Conservative. Meanwhile, it's an old video, it's an old rant. And you know what, I actually never read this part here, but you know, of course the other source you have to go to is the Burnaby, the constituency association, right? And when the journalists got to them, this was their response. It was a joke. But all the lefties took umbrage with it, so we took it down. We were very surprised when people took it serious, said Ariane Eckhart, president of the Burnaby North Seymour Electoral District Association. So, I mean, you know, to me, this just says, well, you know, you wanted to have a little bit of fun and you got caught, right? But it is somebody's reputation, right? And I mean, I think good thing, you know, Rick is a comedian. He's good-natured. He, you know, didn't like it, probably, you know, had a good laugh. But, you know, I'm going to guess he's not going to be pursuing this, like, in court or, you know, any litigation or anything like that. But, you know, things could escalate, you know, when it's about your reputation. And so that's why, you know, he was so quick on social media to say something about it. But yes, thank you so much, Brent. I think that's a great point. Yes?
So So this is a brilliant defense, saying it's a parody or it's a joke. When these are organized campaigns
Yep.
by actual organizations and actual alternative media outlets that are conservative partisan organizations, whether they're legitimately conservative, or they're legitimately right-wing, or they're legitimately white supremacist or white nationalist or populist, is the term
And-
the media seems to use for them. It's this horrific mix of this very negative, manipulative part of the population that is organized.
I mean, in this case, they're not hiding it. They're not even denying it, right? They got caught. They got called out on it, and they're saying, "Yeah, we just wanted to have a little fun." I will say, to your point, it's not just conservatives or right wing. I'm going to show a couple of examples. You know, there have been like the liberals. I can give you examples even if they're not in the presentations. The Liberals have also been caught, you know, with one or two memes this campaign. And I mean, the campaign just got underway. There's been memes circulated against Jagmeet Singh as well, right? And sometimes what you're going to find, what we're going to see here actually, is that it's impossible for us to trace back the source. And that's probably the most frustrating for journalists today. Because what happens, take something like WhatsApp, for example, right? One of the reasons that people use WhatsApp is that it's encrypted on both ends, meaning it's secure, right? And that's why a lot of people use it for communications. Well, that same encryption doesn't allow journalists to get into the groups to fact check anything. So right now, we're having a very hard time getting into WhatsApp, and it's one of the platforms that is distributing the most disinformation, right? As far as we know. So it's any time you have a closed group or a closed social media group, and on Facebook groups too are very hard to get into if you're not a member of that group, right? And then somebody says to you, hey, this is happening in the group. Well, how do you get into the group to check it, right? But you're right, it's not, you know, just one individual person. I mean, this is all like the last 3-4 years, right? Because I left, I want to say, we started fact checking. I was at CBC in 2015 for the 2015 federal election. And then it was just like, oh, Stephen Harper has just sent a video by email to members who have signed up for emails. And then we find out that there's this email, you know, so it was like very innocent, you know, it was like, here's an email, right? And we didn't have to be constantly like having journalists on every single platform checking like every minute of every day. I mean, it's exhaustive, but you're right, it is organized. And so going back to that point, I think it was BuzzFeed, right, who first, I think, discovered in 2014, 2015, the Russian bots or the troll farms, the bot farms, right, in Russia, where you had people who their motive really was just financial. They needed a job, they needed to make money. You know, there's somebody with, you know, not, you know, great motives who wanted to hire all these people. Their motives were political. The people doing it were financial. So absolutely. But you're going to see it's, we're not getting to the source. We're not able yet to get to the source of all the disinformation. And Facebook has a lot to do with it. I think people want Facebook to be more transparent than they're being at the moment, and they're not. I think yesterday or the day before, I saw a story, I think it was yesterday, Twitter has finally, I guess canceled might be the word, like thousands of accounts responsible for disinformation. And everyone's applauding Twitter for their transparency, but we're also looking at Facebook saying, you know, when are you going to do that? So I think they responded. So I don't want to say right now that Facebook isn't doing anything. I think they responded to people's reactions about Twitter doing something in Facebook, but we could look it up at the break a little later. So to continue, so yeah, so again, just remember, try not to, be mindful of also not spreading that disinformation, of not being the culprit of it. And so putting a stamp like that saying false is a good way to do it. So motives. So again, to your falls right into what we were talking about. So financial or political gain, to prey on differences, on our insecurities, on our fears, in an attempt to create division or further division, right? Whether it's politics, whether it's health, sciences. I mean, we see it with, vaccines, right? We have the anti-vaxxers, right, who are, and, maybe there is somebody in this room, that thinks vaccines, cause or are not good. But yes, autism, that's a good one. I've seen other ones, vaccines cause cancer, right? I mean, there is science, and so all of these things are fact checkable when we're looking as journalists to see whether we can fact check something or not. So again, more insidious motives, influencing voting patterns in the US election in 2016. So we had clues, leading up to that it was happening. But finally, the Mueller report confirmed that. I also saw it in the Catalonia independence vote in Spain in 2017. So being from Spain, and most of my family is still in Spain, again, I see these things, right, as well in WhatsApp, Facebook, and I would see these pictures, of protesters who were bloodied, and yes, there were protesters who were bloodied, but while that was going on, there were researchers in the United States who were tracking all of this. And so it took them months, to put all their information or data together. But if you look it up, you'll see that they were able to confirm that there were other forces at work when it came to how the vote was portrayed in social media circles. And some, I think, were traced back to Russia. Others were traced back to countries in Latin America. And again, in the end, really it's just to create mistrust, right, in a country's institutions and ultimately our democracy. So here's some more disinformation. This is just before the election campaign, actually earlier in the year. You go to the Vancouver Courier, which is calls itself Canada's #1 community newspaper site. And in the middle, you see a picture of NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, and it says Jagmeet Singh shows off his new mansion. Not bad. I mean, I would be tempted to click on that. I want you to notice right away something at the bottom called attorney cocktail. Now, I've never heard of that. I have no idea what this is. I'm is that an ad? Are they offering me a cocktail called attorney? I don't know what attorney cocktail is. I've never heard of it. But let's say I click on the ad. What do we find? Yeah, that's not what we find. But so what we find is that, and it was a Tyee, which is an independent digital publication in Vancouver, who broke the story. And they're not a mainstream newsroom, right? They don't have the resources that CTV, Global, CBC have, right? They're a much smaller newsroom. So they they start making phone calls, same thing. So attorney cocktail, that's a hint, right? I don't know what that is. I'm gonna look it up. Turns out, attorney hint, I think it's on the next page. There we go. It's a website. And they say, oh, well, the ad was put there by Taboola. Taboola is an advertising network that pays news sites to host sponsored content. Okay. But Attorney Cocktail says to the Tyee, well, we didn't know that the ad was false. Okay. But you're happy to get the clickbait, right? So you didn't know about it, but you're happy to take all the clicks, right? Because it's a celebrity gossip site. Anyway, the NDP, we call the NDP, the Tyee calls the NDP says, yes, we're aware of it. That same ad has also been running on websites for the History Channel, and the Independent, which is a newspaper based in the UK. So again, this is a story saying NDP leader Jagmeet Singh owns a $5.5 million super luxury home, right? Very gossipy. So again, going back to the NDP sort of gets feds up, says, you know what, attorney cocktail, tabula, we don't know who is behind this. Is it a third-party advertiser? Because there are rules under Elections Canada. I don't know all the rules by heart. As a journalist, I'm going to have to go look it up. Does this contravene any of those rules if it is indeed a third party? So the NDP asks Election Canada to investigate. And again, while you make all these phone calls, right, you're trying to go to the source. You can't just wait for people and get back to you. You have to sort of take an active approach. What else can I do in the meantime to find out, you know, where this comes from? So the Tyee, they start looking at images that are circulating on the internet. And what they find is that whoever created the fake page was taking pictures from like HDTV. And, you know, it actually originated from this collage, this montage of Blake Shelton, and apparently like his mansion and the inside of it. And all they did really was just replace, you know, the photo. And so it's interesting also for this presentation, like I wasn't able to find anymore the original photo. And that also is an indication to me as a journalist that we are trying to stop the dissemination of false information, which is good. So that's why I couldn't give you the photo at the beginning, because I couldn't find it anymore, right? It's been taken down. But we have this one with the Tyee put the false stamp on it. So that's all they did in terms of doctoring the images. But you know, through some techniques that I'll show you later, like reverse Google image and other things, you can find that the pictures are on the internet. You're able to find that montage somewhere else. And so the Tyee was able to debunk it. Now, I know you're all wondering, like, who was at the bottom of it. I've got to tell you, the Tyee was on this story for months. So I think the story was at the beginning of the year, maybe January, February. They reported on it again in the spring, again in the summer. And I think finally, another very even smaller, I think, news organization called Blacklock's Reporter, I think finally got to the bottom of it. And honestly, like at this point, like I can't keep track anymore, but if you're interested, do you know?
No.
Oh.
Yes. Like, it was published on the website, and the website is published by somebody, it's registered to somebody. So like, why is it so difficult to, it's, you know, you can use, like 30 years ago, if a newspaper would publish a false story, what would you do?
So it's
There would be illegal,
yeah.
right?
So it's a small community newspaper, I'm assuming. I'm assuming they don't have the staff that, let's say, Post Media's advertisement department has, right? So maybe it's just one person. I know, for example, like right now, students who just graduated with a Master's of Journalism at Carleton who have taken up jobs in small community newspapers, and they are working as the editor, the right, yeah, you too, yeah. So
you have a publisher, you have somebody to sue.
Ah, yes. So you're wondering if
entity thinks it's false, go and sue the publisher. Everybody's doing it.
I think because it's so much time, there's so much of it, right? It consumes you, right? I mean, it consumes us as just people who don't even have a vested interest in it, right? But imagine, I mean, for Jagmeet Singh, actually just before this, I think there was another meme, and I didn't even want to put that because I don't want to disseminate that one, but that one, there was a meme saying he was wanted on terrorist charges, right? Which, you know, the press debunked, you know, right away. But like, these are just two examples. Like their team, they just get this like day in and day out. And so I think at the end of the day, really, you're picking your battles. And I think as a journalist too, that is actually a very good point. Well, yeah, no, you're right. As a journalist, like depending what your resources are, right? You
didn't see it, you don't know it, you don't have a source to attribute. So all the rules talk about, as a journalist, you should not even be publishing it.
Yes.
Like I don't understand why there's a discussion. And misinformation always existed. It's propaganda. We're talking about Russian trolling farms.
Yeah.
they see it, I'm Russian, they
Yeah.
see it as a war against the Western values.
Right.
Walt
And it's
Disney-
military, it's not a job, survival job, it's a military operation for them.
Walt
Yes.
Disney was a military propaganda officer
Yeah.
before he became Walt
Right.
Disney.
Right.
Maybe he really still was a propaganda guy as Walt Disney.
Yeah.
I
We're
know.
talking about like philosophy, it's gossiping, like when two neighbors gossip, you know, NTPD to release in a luxury, mansion.
Yeah.
Like we should not care about this.
Yeah. Yeah. If I'm Jagmeet Singh, I would like to have you on my team.
So today on City TV,
Yeah.
I saw the latest naughty costume from some silly company that had the naughty version of Mr. Rogers' costume. And I'm like, how is this news?
Right.
I just
right.
saw this on the internet as gossip and
So you're right. Everything is an exercise in judgment. Yes, Barry.
I think one of the problems, though, is like if you look at the front page of the Vancouver Courier,
Yeah.
they're often not having control over what ads are being displayed to what people. So it becomes this rabbit hole that you go down and you kind of talk to it. They still haven't figured out ultimately how it got there or who paid for it.
No, you do. You, as a publisher, you allow yourself to, Google or somebody to sell ads. So there is somebody who pays for this space to you as a web publisher. So it's not that untraceable.
What I remember from the story is that the attorney cocktail people said, "Oh, we're going to look into it." They looked into it and they said, "Oh, you're right." Right, just kind of like the Burnaby Association before. "Oh, you're right. It contravenes our policies. We're going to do something about it." Brent, you were going to say something?
Yeah, no, I was going to say that, because you see those kind of blog ads at the bottom of a lot of pages, like even
Yeah.
ESPN and big news organizations too. And I think you put on your slide there was about Taboola, which is sort of an advertising
Yeah,
aggregator.
and it says it here, sponsored links by Taboola. That's the
So
other clue.
That's the thing too. So
Yeah.
to understand that what the newspaper has done is they've been approached by Taboola to say, hey, we would like to work with you because we'll give you this amount of money for ad revenue, and we'll populate it with whatever these algorithmically designed, 3 or 4 ads are at the bottom. So in this case, it's not even the Vancouver Courier who's actually
This is
putting
it.
those ads there. It's Taboola that is dealing with advertising clients, cocktail,
Attorney
or
cocktail.
whatever. And so they're the ones who are populating it, and then the newspapers or the publication is just saying, well, this is the widget that we've installed because this is our working relationship with Taboola. So it's just like there's so many layers. So in that way,
And the
it's-
publisher has a right to kind of do it, control it. What Taboola puts out on my, I have a website,
Yeah.
I don't allow it all,
Agreed.
Right.
it's your
No, I-
responsibility, be responsible, that's
Yeah,
it.
I mean, I think your point, I think you have a great
Yeah.
point. It comes down to accountability, right? And so who is taking responsibility for this? Yes?
So back to my point, there's no consequences. And so you can say, oops,
Yeah,
or you can be sophisticated and say, well, it's satire, it's parody, so I'm covered under libel laws, or it's freedom of speech. There was a situation recently where the library, Toronto Public Library, got nailed because they allowed the big Nazi event. Well, the Nazi event was a memorial for the Wicked Witch lawyer who has been around previously. She's dead now, thank God. But she was the Wicked Witch lawyer who helped the Nazi movement in Canada and in the US do the whole freedom of speech thing that protected them for decades until they did such horrible stuff that they got deported, some of them.
I think
So
you're,
there's this sort of
yeah,
lack of consequences.
yeah. Well, I think,
Sophisticated approach of using the speech and satire laws as a cruise, and then no one is taking them to task.
well, what I see here, like this tells me that the NDP's made a decision, and for them, what matters going into the federal election campaign is finding out whether this is a third party, hired by the Conservative Party of Canada or the Liberal Party of Canada. That's what they're really interested in. I think the rest, you have to pick your battles. Yeah. Yes.
Those groups are funded
Yes.
by
Yes.
Susana, the
Sí.
complicated thing here is that there is one stream that becomes like many rivers, and one river is just ours, the one that is run by journalists. But then there are the social media. So by the time somebody tries to do something, the thing is all spread over, all over. There is no use in trying to get and find who did this, what the purpose was it legal or illegal? Yes, already the people who has read, they make their own assumptions based in their own belief.
And by that time, your mind is already made up. You've already made a decision.
You read, even though there is a correction next day, in 1 hour, 2 days after.
That's an excellent point. How many of us will share a story, right? And the story gets updated. The headline maybe doesn't show up in that post that you posted 2 hours ago. Are you actually, as the consumer of news that you are, going to go make the time, find the time to get the new update and then tell all your followers, your friends, oh, look, there was an update and, this is what the journalist found. You're right. By then, we already have a belief. The assumption is there, our mind's already made up.
Especially in this time, for example, in the case of the federal election, because it's a very short time, like 6 weeks, something can happen and then, but
yes, yes.
The reality is over.
And we're going to see later when we get to the exercises with Pointer, that is one of the first decisions that you have to make, right? You have all this disinformation coming at you as a journalist, right? It's there, you see it. There's some questions that you have to ask yourself because you can't pursue every single one of them. And so that is actually one of the big questions that we have to ask ourselves. And we'll see what some of the other fact checkers are doing, right? But it's about, the consequences, and will it make a difference or is it a complete waste of my time? So again, you all make very good points. So more examples of disinformation. So immigration, refugees, a big source, a big topic, right? And we see this all the time. So this one was about a compact, an agreement about migration. And the assumption, or the meme here says, in December, Trudeau is getting ready to sign the Compact on Migration Agreement with the United Nations that will hand over our Canadian sovereignty to the UN. The agreement is a plan to resettle 245 million migrants by the year 2030. At the bottom, share if you are against signing the Compact on Migration. Underneath that, take back your power, Canada, right? Lots of clues here. But so who had to look into this? It was actually our friend Louis, who is not here today. So Louis works for Agence France Presse, AFP Fact Check in Montreal, and you can read the story. He says various online posts claiming that the UN's Global Compact for Migration, featuring a plan to resettle 245 million migrants, and is stripping nations of sovereignty over immigration. That is false. The Migration Pact is non-legally binding agreement between the UN that aims to regulate migration flows and cannot legally impose anything on its signatories. And so I've put the link there. You can go again and look to see how Louis did this, but this was a big enough story for Louis and AFP to decide, yes, this is worth pursuing, right? Because, this is at the UN, the Prime Minister of Canada is there, and AFP has a global audience, not just Canadian. So that was worth it for AP to do. I would love to really break down everything. I've put links there because if I did, we could be here all day, all week. This could be a course, right? So I'm putting links because we can't break down everything, or else I won't get through the presentation. I think I'm only on the first dozen slides. So on refugees, so this was a very big one it says December 2015. So you might remember this. The Vancouver Sun states that Syrian refugees will be paid a meal allowance per person per day of 15 for breakfast, 16 for lunch, 30 for dinner by the federal government. This, a typical family with 4 kids will receive $186 a day, $5,580 a month for meals alone, and this from a government that somehow cannot afford more than about $1,100 a month for all expenses for pensioners. I can only dream of eating, living this high on the hog. Think I could get the same deal if I moved to Syria. So there was this, that they get paid more than pensioners.
You can see that it was published on Facebook somewhere, and you covered the name.
Yes.
We shall know it here.
Oh yeah, yes, no, that is absolutely available as well. Again, this is just part of a decision as a journalist. Like, do you want to expose?
It's not a report that somebody writes on their own page. Like if I know
Yeah.
to publish it on my door.
Mm-hmm. But the question is who is that person, right? Is that person actually a person, right? Or is that person part of a greater group? Because this was one meme. There were several variations of this meme to the point where this was December, so just after Christmas. So if I got any time off at CBC, I would try to take a few days at Christmas. I come back in January. We're still talking about the story and all the variants of the story. And so I actually get tasked with this one. And and that's what I have to fact check. Do government-assisted refugees receive more money for food than Canadians on welfare, right? You have a question?
I was just going to say, it's clear that people don't read these things because that math is totally ridiculous.
Yeah.
Family of four kids, $61 a day, and the total is $186. That does not compute at all.
Yeah, so you're right, and part of this exercise for me was definitely doing the math, right? And figuring out who did I have to go to. So I think I write here, and this story, there's nearly 4,000 comments there. There was like way more on Facebook. In terms of click, like this story got so much. This was just the beginning, I think, for mainstream media starting to fact check memes. It was just the beginning, 2015, 2016. But this took, again, right? So I had to start off. I'm like, okay, who do I call? I don't know anything about, how much pensioners get paid in BC, right? So you're contacting the federal government, you're contacting the provincial governments, you're contacting the MPs, the critics also, right? Because you need to verify that what the elected official is saying is right. So you go to the critic as well. Anyways, a whole story on this, I think, and this is around the time also where the Canadian government is trying to resettle, right, a very high number of Syrian refugees, right? And this is why this is happening. So what does it say here? So federal and provincial officials told us that the figures are simply not correct. Federal monthly support for Syrian refugees is based on provincial territorial welfare rates. I mean, it was all about math. I had to go and figure out how much do the pensioners get, what do the Syrian refugees get, why do they get it, how long do they get it for, what did they tell us here? Refugee support on par with welfare assistance. So, they're definitely not getting more. It's usually the benefits are like for the first year only. Again, right? But this is all disinformation because somebody disagrees with the Canadian policy of resettling a large number of refugees in a very short period of time. Again, disinformation on the carbon tax. Today at church, we learned that the carbon tax is going to cost our church $50,000 this year alone. That's the cost of one less pastor for the sick and suffering and less help for those who need it most in our community. Again, we're not all experts, by the way, on, let's say, the economy, on finances, right? Most reporters are general reporters. And so it's like you have to know a little bit about a lot. If you're lucky, you also have a beat. But with cuts and with the way things are, less and less reporters in newsrooms have beats. So, for example, the reason I was able to debunk that other story is because immigration was one of my beats, on top of being a general reporter. But I look at this, I'm like, I'm not an expert on the carbon tax, right? So it's not necessarily easy either, right? If you're a general reporter. See.
On this, the carbon tax, one more problem is that when we were thinking about reliable sources of information, you may think before that government is a reliable source, but it's not necessarily. Like you know that with the sticker problem with the Ontario government asking the gas station to put a sticker there on how much it's going to cost the gas for
At the pump.
Canadians, the pump, but they are not putting all the information. They are not saying, they're telling the people that the Liberals are going to be giving back money through the
Yes,
via the
that's an excellent point,
credits.
and that has come up again during the first week of the federal
And the
election
stickers are there
campaign. Yeah,
already. The
yeah,
stickers are there.
yeah.
People are reading that.
yeah. So again, selective information. You're not giving the full picture, but also you're saying somebody else also has a role to play in this, right? Why not ask more questions instead of just allowing for that sticker to be there? You're right. Everyone has a role. Everyone has a role to
And
play.
for the common people, it's very discouraging because they don't know what
Yeah.
who to trust. And
You just want to put gas in your car because you just need to get to that interview for a job, right? And yeah,
like before, we were trusting the people with the climate news, but then you were out without an umbrella and there were rain, and you were making fun of that. Now it's more problematic than that. Like you don't know really how to do your decisions because you are never sure what is the truth.
right. And so I hope what you take from today when we're going to look at what the International Fact-Checking Network is doing is giving you reliable sources, because there are more and more teams now across the world that are hiring people to just do that, to fact check. And so that's, I think, also one of the things is a part of the piece of the puzzle here is education also, right? Like we all need to educate each other, right? Because we see the disinformation or sometimes the misinformation in our own networks, WhatsApp, Facebook, whatever it is. But we all have a role to play. And so I think to your point, yes, like I've seen in my own feeds, you know, sometimes it's a family member or relative, and you know they'll pass something along, and to me as a journalist, I say, how could they possibly think that this is true, right? But I have to be mindful, like they don't have that training, right? That it's not their job. They don't do this for a living, right? And so you really have to think, like, as your average person, you know, how can we educate them? And I do have other tools I'm going to show you later to not just for yourself, like that's the other thing too. I think we all, especially if you're in media or journalistic circles, like you think you know it all. you think you're like, okay, maybe I can't learn anything, but you'd be surprised. Like I took this this course that I'm going to show you, and I learned a lot too. So disinformation on taxing Netflix, that was another one. Canada moves to ban Christians from demonstrating in public under new anti-hate proposal. Claims resurface that the flu vaccine is designed to spread cancer. People developing horns from the phone use. Did you like that one? That one was fun. That is an excellent question. Yes, that was false. It was not true. It was not true. It was not true. So what happened with that story is whoever wrote it up, I can't remember who it was.
It was some Australian media.
An Australian media, okay. Read a scientific review, a paper. Again, you're not an expert, right? You need to go to an expert who knows how to read a scientific review and interpret it. So what they did is that they just saw, you know, some x-rays or whatever, they wrote the story up, were not an expert in the story. That story took off, right? That story took off. I mean, I was like, I knew it, we're looking down, we spent all our day, things are happening, everybody, right? Because we all have, you know, that feeling that really this is like the biggest experiment in our lifetimes, right? That we have no idea really what is gonna happen at the end of this all, right? So again, that also played on suppositions that we already had, right? Which is just lended itself perfectly to that type of headline. But if I remember correctly, I don't know if it was Time or some US publication took another go, had an expert, like a science or health expert, take another look at that and debunked it, saying no, like that is not what it's saying. So let's continue. Is that how you're all feeling right about now? Oh my God, I know. I tried to find like another uplifting meme after this, and I really just like, I couldn't. So we're just gonna go with Dre. Time for a workshop. What time is it, Brent?
It is 2:45.
And this is supposed to end at what time?
Yeah, it's at 3 o'clock, but we can go a little bit over.
3? Okay, so, okay. Pointers International Fact Checking Network. And I'm not ignoring you. I saw that you had your hand up, but as you can see, I've got to go. But I'm happy to answer questions at the break, at the coffee break maybe. Oh, Barry?
No, I'm just.
Oh. Sorry.
All good.
Okay, all good. Excellent. Continue. All right. So if you look this up, Pointers International Fact Checking Network, you have all these organizations around the world. AP Fact Check, Africa Check, Chequeado in Argentina, factcheck.org US, Full Fact in the UK, PolitiFact in the US, Snopes. I didn't even know Snopes was still around. Snopes is still doing a good job. Good for Snopes. They're going to outlive all of us. They're still fact checking. God bless them. And so, Pointer again, is this important? Is it fact checkable? Africa Check. I love this question from Africa Check. What impact would the statement have if it goes unchecked, right? And so I think that is an excellent question in terms of determining, can you spend your time and energy, right, on this? PolitiFact recommends asking, is it significant? Was it simply a slip of the tongue? Is it verifiable through facts, or is it just an opinion or political hyperbole? Okay, there is a video exercise. I'm not sure that we have time to do the video exercise right now, but here's what I recommend. So International Fact Checking Network. They have a course here, the Pointer Institute does, on fact checking. It is free. It was super easy to sign up. It just took my email, and I had access within 5 minutes. It is self-directed. I would recommend doing this like in a group or in a class. Too bad Barry just walked out. I was going to say like it's a good exercise to do with other people. I had to do it by myself, and I had so many questions. So I would recommend doing it. It's a couple of hours, about 2 hours. It says 90 minutes. I was taking notes, so it took me a little bit longer. But it's very good. I recommend it. It's free. There's no reason not to do it. You're going to learn a lot. Is that Barry? No, it's Roger. Hello, Roger. So, okay, I said I was going to give you some tools. So here we are. Fact-checking crowd sizes. We have something called mapchecking.com. I'm just going to go to it really fast, mapchecking.com. So do you remember when Trump was inaugurated and there was a big controversy about the size of the crowd, right? Yeah. So back then, we did not have this tool. This tool was developed by a French developer, and we now have it available. And I was thinking just yesterday, right, when we were seeing the marches against climate action, this tool, fantastic. All you need is the name of a place or a location. You type it in, Google will find it, and then let's see, can I do the exercise here live? I'm just worried that if I do all of them live now, we might not have time. Hands-on, let's go over here, fact-checking, claims, testing the tool. Okay, so the claim is there were more than 1 million people protesting the government in Buenos Aires, Plaza de Mayo alone. So we want to fact check if that number is true or not. So we go to mapchecking.com, which I did. And I think all we need to do is use the cursor like this and just sort of say, okay, this is Plaza. This, by the way, is not the Plaza. It's a different Plaza, but I'm trying to save time. So here we go. This is the plaza. And then right here, it will tell you if you're thinking that it's 1 people per like square meter, it's like 7,000 people. But what you do is that you have a range. So it could be as small as 700 people, or it could be as many as 54,000 people. When I did do it with, you know what, we should just do it. I feel rushed now, but we should just do it. You know what, we'll do it. Plaza de Mayo, Buenos Aires. So you see, it finds it's the same thing. So again, you take, whoa, no. How do I undo that? Control. I don't know where that's.
Maybe reset the area button.
Yeah. Do you see reset? Oh, reset the area, yes. Ah, thank you very much. Okay, so same thing again, same idea, like such a great app. So you just do this, you pick all the points. You have to be a little bit more precise than I'm being right now because I'm rushed, because it does make a difference. And so again, the estimation here is 116,000 maximum, so definitely not 1 million. So very easily fact-checked. Great tool, yes.
Like if you work at CDC,
See.
you get report from Argentina that there was this reports about 1 million, people crowd. Like you cannot report it. You can either say like, police estimates 1 million people arrested, or somebody who's our correspondent has seen it and he or she estimates. Like you cannot use this to report, really.
Well, yes and no. You can use this as a tool to put against what officials are telling you.
Because you basically will be like also disseminating fake information because you haven't been there, you didn't witness the computers.
So when you do this course, you're going to find out that there's a little formula that the app developer has come up with. And apparently,
it has nothing to do. The main principle of journalism, like you have to witness, you have to attribute it to the source.
but even with that, we are not able, we are bad at math. We are bad at trying to estimate. And I can tell you this from working on Parliament Hill. We all have cameras pointing towards Parliament Hill. I can tell you that we are all terrible when there's a protest, a demo, at guessing what the crowd number is. Every media outlet will come up with a different number. What do we have to do? We have to go to the RCMP, ask the RCMP what other numbers. Now,
It's the problem of your reporting and my reporting, like our reporting.
Crowd size estimation is estimation. It is definitely not an exact science.
If you cannot establish, you don't report it. It's very simple rule. I know that I don't know why everybody's saying, like, it's amnesia of all these classes.
Right. So again, I think this is the difference between fact-checking and debunking, okay? And so when we are trying to debunk a lot of things that are on social media, for example, we don't have the exact accurate information that we would if we were fact-checking something that I can easily go to for an official stat, or that I can go to let's say to an academic or something like this. So debunking is like a little bit different in that sense, and you're trying to compare different points of information to each other. I think that this,
You cannot. Like,
well, in the example of Trump and the crowd size, I think this would have been very helpful.
No, you're becoming like Trump if you report like this. That's what I'm telling you.
Okay, well,
because he uses other tools.
Well, no.
Other tools.
Well, we're not going to get into what tools Trump uses or doesn't use. That is definitely for another discussion. Okay, reverse image search. Again, we've seen all these photos. There are ways for us to determine if it's the first time that they're being circulated or where they originated from. Again, you go to images, google.com, or you go, and I never know how to pronounce it. Is it like Tiny Eye? Is it Tinai? Does anybody know? Tiny Eye seems like better, but it's like Tinai. Do you know, Brent?
I don't know.
No, yeah. Anyways, Yeah, so these are two tools. For example, yesterday we had somebody on, I think it was Twitter, who put up pictures of supposedly a conservative candidate at a party where everybody was in blackface or brownface. And right away, I was like, oh no, here we go. This is how it starts, right? So there's, it was not a good week in Canadian politics, but now we have these images surfacing, and you have to ask yourself that question. What happens if I don't look into this, right? And I think that was one of the memes that journalists had to look into yesterday. I did it myself. Again, not fun when you're like doing it alone. You're not in a newsroom. I'm a student at Carleton right now, a graduate student. So I asked somebody else to also run it by these search engines, and then we were comparing notes. And we could determine, again, it wasn't like 100%, but there were different, several indications pointing to telling us that these images were not what they were portrayed to be. I think in the end, maybe the local CBC or Radio-Canada ended up debunking the images. They were in fact real, of an event where people were in blackface and brownface, but the MP was not one of the people who had done that. So again, just another tool in your arsenal. Google Earth, again, so good. If I didn't know, again, like how sophisticated Google Earth has become, but the exercise that you get here from the International Fact-Checking course with Pointer is, to go back historically and see what was at a certain location. So I think they've picked a point in New York City, and they're saying you can use Google Earth to see what happened 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, see what was there. So if somebody says, I think the example was maybe about the 9/11 conspiracies, it didn't happen, it wasn't real. Google Earth now can actually show you historically what happened to that location over time, like a fantastic tool. I'm gonna keep going. It's 2:56, I'm mindful of the time, Brent. Okay, so when we were talking about education earlier, CBC has just developed a chatbot. And again, I know we think we know it all, but I went to my Facebook Messenger and I uploaded the chatbot. I think that chatbot is very good for, we all have that family member or a friend who is constantly spreading misinformation, like unknowingly, they just don't know, they don't understand. It's a very good educational tool. But beyond that, for people who have a bit more experience, I think what they're gonna do is for every week of the federal election campaign, they've picked a theme, and the chatbot so basically it's very interactive, right? So it'll say, hi, how are you? You're good, okay. Do you know how to spot fake news? Yes or no? Yes. Okay, are you sure? Well, we're gonna give you an example. You're like, oh, I'm not so sure. So it's very interactive. It will go back and forth with you. And so I think this could be helpful. And what else do we have? I think it has stopped. There we go. Questions? Do you have any questions? It's 2:58. Excellent timing. Yes, there are two. Did you have a question or no? No? Yes.
You mentioned Google searches, and I just wanted to point out that just searching on the internet can't be the end of it. Every search engine may also have its own agenda. It's a corporation. It collects information. So fact checking, like you said, is a huge exercise. Mm-hmm. And even sometimes, a reverse image, mm-hmm. It's you've got to check it against multiple sources.
Absolutely.
It just doesn't stop with one search that validates, oh, it was fake, or that it's fact.
Absolutely, and that's the difference.
Fact also has to then again be checked.
Exactly, exactly, and that is the difference between, let's say, listening to a speech by Trump, which it is one example that they give us, right? and fact checking like very straight up, comments about, the U.S.'s economy or the recession or employment or unemployment. It's the difference between that and, yes, what memes are circulating on social media, which we're trying to debunk. And I think Brent has something to add.
No.
Oh, no. Oh, you have a question? Okay. But yes, I again, you make an excellent point. Like, we could not, like, for example, I saw yesterday or the day, with those images of the alleged CPC candidate at a blackface, brownface party, I saw a journalist put that out on Twitter. And I don't know why the person did that. The person said, hey, here are, this account is circulating these pictures. Normally, we would never do that. You would not bring it to the attention of the public unless you have looked into it first, because the public is looking to you, right, to tell them whether this is, yes, a false or not. So I thought it was interesting. I kept like tabs on the account, and they never deleted that tweet, which I thought was very interesting, because now that person is sending, that journalist was sending people to that account with those pictures. And again, right, if fact checking isn't your job, if you already are, have all these assumptions against a certain party, you're pushing a certain agenda, a certain angle, then it's very easy to believe that, yes, so-and-so MP, oh, look, that's definitely her in the blackface or brownface.
You have to put one search string in several search engines.
Absolutely.
And see the number of different results you get, just to know that sometimes fact checking in itself and finding the sources.
Absolutely. And so you can see how this is like so time consuming, right? And exhausting, and also exhausting for the journalists who have to do this, because I have to say to you, when I see, I'm sure you're all familiar by now with Daniel Dale from the Toronto Star, who made it his mission to fact check US President Donald Trump, from day one. I can tell you well, Brent, I think we had him, he came in to speak to us at the CAJ conference, right? I wasn't there, but I mean, I looked at that and I thought, there is no way that this is an 8-hour job. Like, Daniel is working, during work hours, after work hours, like he's living and breathing this, right? Is it healthy? Me personally, I don't think so. It has now, helped him advance in his career. He's left the Toronto Star, he's now at CNN. If those are your goals, then, good for you. But I would say, and I don't hesitate to say this, like, you do have to look after yourself as a journalist, and especially I think if you're from a racialized community in this day and age, there is so much coming at you that the white media, that immigrants, settlers just do not have to deal with, the same way that you will. And so no one is gonna look after you. You have to do it for yourself. So I would really strongly recommend, you know what? Put your phone down, go for a walk, get some fresh air. Hang out with your friends, with your family, with people who you love. This can really be all consuming and just not healthy at the end of the day. Any other questions? It's 3:03. Yes.
I just want to say one thing in this. I think it is what has happened today is that truth has gone beyond. Truth is not really truth anymore. It is basically a perception, which is in the eyes of the people, and how do they portray the same truth. So it's not about fact checking only. It's also about why it is spreading so much. Is because people are also gullible. People are using it to further confirm on their perceptions to other people.
Their own biases.
So it's basically become bias. For example, the photograph, the video that you're showing right now, that gentleman had his own version of truth, had his own perception of what was Canada and what was Trudeau doing. And he used the Trudeau interview with many other images to create a different perception of the truth. So I think in that, having said that, that is what, as journalists, we have to take in mind, that are we creating another perception of truth, or are we actually standing for the truth and trying to find the truth?
I'm going to say two things to that. I think there is still truth, and I still think that there are facts. And there are certain facts that you cannot dispute. Having said that, it has been shown, research has been shown, that we are just, for whatever reason it is impossible for us, or very difficult, very rare for people to change their minds once they are made up, which is, I guess you can see, sometimes the political parties, will start recruiting people very young, right, at an age where you're still, you can still sort of mold the person, because research has shown this, that, and it's very depressing whenever I read a story like that telling me that no matter how many facts I can be shown on a certain topic, if my mind has already been made up on that, no amount of facts are going to make me believe that it is the truth. So yes, you make an excellent point. Any other questions? Yes?
Yeah. Susana, according with your experience as a journalist covering politics, do you know, is it doing enough to avoid the international entity interfere in this election? We have 1 month for the election, and as far as I know, the federal government implemented one accord with social media owners to avoid to receive money from international entities. But I don't know if that is working, or do you think we really face after October 21st the result of that penetration?
I can tell you that our security and intelligence agencies, so the RCMP, CSIS, all of them are very concerned about interference from agents abroad during this election. We've just had week 1 of the federal election campaign, and I couldn't help, you're laughing, exactly. I'm like, we're worried about foreign agents? I'm like, we have leaders, right? Every single leader. I mean, we have bigger issues. We have issues of race that we need to discuss, of racism, right? I mean, our prime minister is not sure how many times he was in blackface or brownface, right? Like, I think going into this election, we were all, yes, concerned about foreign, and I think we should still be, and I mean, 4 or 5 weeks is still a very long time in a federal election campaign, and anything can happen. But at this point, I really think, the parties, the leaders they don't need any help. They're imploding all by themselves. But I wish I could have a more specific answer to your efforts, but I know the agencies were very concerned. They were reaching out in terms of educational tools. Like, you'll see it when you go to the public service websites. They do have an interest as well in educating the population. I know there were concerns about Elections Canada. Is Elections Canada doing enough also? It seems that Elections Canada maybe doesn't have the resources either to help us with that. So I think it's going to take, again, several federal agencies, but also the expertise of fact checkers. And it could be that it's not even, journalists in Canada who find out, right? Because, I mean, BuzzFeed found out what was happening in Russia. The story this week with the Prime Minister was Time Magazine. I should probably get off the slide, right? Before you go, is there any more questions? So are you suggesting 3? Okay. I just, because before you go, So I've summarized the tools here, 5 tools for fact checkers. We didn't get into deep fakes and cheap fakes, which is trying to verify video, which is a little bit more difficult. But again, that information is, and the links are in the course, that free course, if you want to take it or buddy up with somebody and do it together. I started a Twitter list. I haven't made it public yet. I will at the break. It's called Fact Checking Journals. So anybody that I mentioned today, AP Check, Africa Check, Chequeado, anybody who is sort of fact checking on a full-time basis, I've started to add them to a list. You can subscribe to the list, follow the list. After today, you'll have my contact information. If you find out that more people are doing this, let me know, just send me a DM. I'll add them to the list. I think it's very useful. I think also this is another way, so I'm very big on lists because you don't have to follow somebody, but you can put them on a list. So what I was talking about before, all that self-care that I think we all need to take, being constantly bombarded with things that come at you, that hit you at your core, that have an impact on you, that make you cry at night, or just second guess humanity. You don't have to have all that coming at you. You can put these things in a list if your job is to actually check on them regularly, but then you have control and it doesn't have to pop up in your feed. You just, once a day or whenever it is that you need to, you go to the list and you look at it. So I'm big on lists, use them. That's my contact info. There were little numbers throughout the things, sources, I've put all the links there. Credit, so I produced this with files from Louis. Louis' information is there as well. You can reach out to him. But before you said, Brent, that I have time for how many more questions?
Yeah, you can do 3 more.
2 or 3 more? See.
I would like to ask you from your experience, I don't know how long have you been out of journalism?
So I left CBC in 2016, and after 6 years, and I went to the Ottawa Citizen.
Because I'm concerned about how much mainstream media in Canada is relying on just to start the day on what is going on in social media, because that gave you another spin. Yes, before I remember I'm an old journalist, and I remember that when we came to the papers, we used to coming to the paper, we were listening to radio, and we were trying to get the feeling what is going on today.
Yeah.
But the radio was reading our headlines from newspapers.
And that still happens today.
From each one.
Yeah.
But it was kind of secure exercise because we trust the other media.
Right.
But now we're relying on social media as journalists.
Right.
So I would like to know how often that happens in newsrooms in Canada.
So every morning you have a morning meeting, newsroom participates. I mean, I worked in the Parliamentary Hill Bureau. Your job at that meeting is to come with ideas and pitch them. If you don't have an idea, somebody else is going to assign you to one.
Yeah, I mean, how much do you refer to social media as a source of, hey, you know what?
Yeah.
This is happening.
Yeah.
People are speaking about this, let's do something about this. But then who is behind that trend?
Right. Again, it's a very subjective call, right? Everything is very subjective. So again, you have to wonder, I like that question from Africa Check, what is the impact going to be if you don't look into it, if you don't fact check it, right? And there's so many different elements, right? There's pressures. You have pressure from headquarters in Toronto, right? Everybody has an interest. That meeting is like one meeting. Then there's another meeting with, your bosses in Toronto. The meetings just go on. In the meantime, I've always personally been of the mind that we should set the agenda and not let the politicians set it for us. And so a big problem I think we have in the media is the politicians send us their agendas. They tell us this is what's happening at 9, at 10, at noon, at 2, at 1. And then, we organize pools, we send reporters, but we also pay for the Canadian press. The Canadian press is the wire agency. Every media outlet buys into the Canadian press. I'm talking about mainstream outlets, right? So this is a constant struggle or fight for me as a journalist in the political bureau was, if the Canadian press already has a reporter there and we're already paying the Canadian press, right, to pick up that article that they're going to write, why would you, as the public broadcaster, send me to this event unless I can advance the story or unless I have something that somebody else.
That's the core of journalism.
And we are still going to have a camera there, and it's still going to be live streamed, and you're going to be able to see it with your own eyes. What I'm saying is, if I have a beat, and I think an issue on race, for example, deserves some attention, and nobody else in that meeting wants to pitch it, I'm going to say, you know what? I have the story. I would rather pursue the story. This is why I think that story is important. We can pick up the copy of CP. We're still going to have that camera there. We're still going to put it on the web. We're still going to live stream it. I think it's a way to maximize our tools as journalists and what we're able to cover. That's my view. Yes?
So there was a recent thing that happened where a very intense internet troll in Mississauga who was attacking the mayor. He had run for mayor himself and failed. He went after the multimillionaire who runs the Paramount Foods empire, who's Muslim Canadian. And he said horrible things about him, supporting terrorism, all this kind of stuff. And his stores are dens of terrorism, full of sympathizers. So he got sued. And it was primarily after he actually started confronting the man publicly. So he actually confronted the multimillionaire when he was with his kids, and the man left, and he followed the multimillionaire to the car and terrorized the whole family. So he got sued for $1.5 million and lost. So huge impact, but it was never really covered in the media. But it has powerful ramifications, because now you can be sued. There's precedent. And yes, he took it a little too far. He went into real life, but it's interesting to see that come back. It's interesting to see fact checking come back and stuff. And with passion and relevance and with tools, it's great. But it's also interesting to see the power of being sued. Right, bad guys can get sued now because they've been able to hide behind this. Oh, it's satire, it's parody. It's freedom of choice, freedom of speech, right? So that's an interesting development.
Yes, and it's unfortunate if it wasn't covered more widely. I mean, I think we all know that these are difficult times, but I also think if you are a community newspaper, radio station, you should, organizations, I think like the CAJ, like the Media Council, we have people who can tell you, maybe can point you in a direction of, who can you pitch maybe that story to at the Toronto Star or at the CBC. So I would definitely encourage you, if you are a reporter, a journalist working at a community, whether it's a radio station, TV, paper, whatever it is, to find those stories that the mainstream media is not covering, but also to start making connections with people who can maybe, point you in the right direction and see maybe if you can pitch that to another organization in order for it to be published more widely. Any other questions? Thank you so much. I don't know what you were expecting with Louis. I'm not Louis. I've never met Louis. He seems like a very lovely person. Thank you.